Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flix Show. My name is Chris Wong. This is episode 374 of the Ping Pong Flix Show, and today I want to go over mainly about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I think this is a huge topic, and some of the things that came out today could be quite interesting. As I said before, I want to go into what is the Snyder Cut and why does it exist is kind of the same thing. For a lot of people who want to know, what is it? What are you talking about, the Snyder Cut? Didn't we see the Snyder Cut in the theaters? And for a lot of people in the know, like you and I and most of the people that listen to me on my channel and people on Twitter and social media in general, know that the theatrical version of Justice League is not the Snyder Cut. It was taken over by Joss Whedon. The studio came in, changed a whole bunch of stuff. Joss Whedon reshot a lot of things, and they edited together, compacted it into a movie that is less than 2 hours, and that is the movie that we got. Now, a lot of people are still saying it doesn't exist. It is kind of frustrating for a lot of people, I understand. And it kind of also depends on who you're talking to, how much do they know about film, how much do they know about cuts and things like that. Because if you were trying to say that the Snyder Cut, a director's cut, his director's cut of Justice League doesn't exist, then you'd be wrong. In fact, you can even research this yourself. When you go to the DGA.org, the Creative Rights Summary, there is a section called number 4, Preparing the Director's Cut. And I'm going to read it to you as follows. The director's right to prepare his or her director's cut is absolute. You must supervise the editing of the first cut following completion of the editor's assembly. You have the right to instruct the editor and to make whatever changes you deem necessary in preparing the director's cut. No one can interfere with or cut behind you during the period of the director's cut. The producer must give you time to complete the director's cut as follows. For theatrical motion pictures, 10 weeks or 1 day of editing for each 2 days of scheduled photography, whichever is longer. This process comes after principal photography. And as you and I know, and most of us already know, and for people who don't, Zack Snyder finished principal photography around October. Then we can say 10 weeks, about 10 weeks after that is from November to possibly about February, March, something like that. Then that is probably the amount of time he had to have done his director's cut. He put his cut together for everything principal photography, possibly had VFX, possibly had things, unfinished things, but in order to put it together so that he can take that cut, his director's cut, to the studio, to whoever's in charge of the final cut authority, because he doesn't have final cut authority. And we know that now because of how many changes were made and ultimately the movie that we got. We also can probably absolutely understand now that he probably wasn't even present for Final Cut or the theatrical cut, because he said it himself. He did not see the movie. His director's cut, his version of the movie, is 214 minutes. Still many months away from the release in November, where a lot of different films would take a long time to actually do post-production, finish up the VFX. There's a lot of things that had to be done. In fact, Zack Snyder even shows pictures of his unfinished cut. He shows Wonder Woman killing Steppenwolf. You can clearly see the green screen behind. The Ray Fisher cyborg dream, where his family's in the background, and the background he had to put a template in because he didn't finish that either. Darkseid looks unfinished as well. That means that he didn't have time from May when he left to finish that, and which is why we believe that most of the 214-minute Snyder Cut was unfinished. What does he mean then by saying, I have a cut? It's done. What I believe that means is he's talking in terms of how filming works. His director's cut. the director's cut before giving it to Final Cut Authority was truly done. He had finished, he put it together, but he didn't do a lot of the effects because he only had 10 weeks to accomplish that, to put it in a timeline so that the producers and the studio can look at it and understand what type of movie he was going to make. For him to complete all 100% of the visual effects and everything would be very time consuming, more than 10 weeks. And also, why would he do that if he didn't even have Final Cut Authority, and he would believe that the studio will probably cut his movie down like how they did with Batman v Superman? And so with that in mind, you can kind of fully understand that his 214-minute version could not have been completed, fully realized, visual effects, sound effects, music, all done within those 10 weeks. We can safely assume that his director's cut was probably not approved and was probably chopped down, seeing what the studio reacted to Batman v Superman. The other clue that Zack Snyder gave that there are other cuts is what he said at the SnyderCon, when he said, yeah, sure, there is a cut. I have many cuts. Meaning, he had many cuts after his initial 214-minute director's cut. Finally, today, we can understand that a little bit better. This is coming from Mark Hughes in his conversation with Helen O'Hara. Helen O'Hara made an article yesterday talking about the Snyder Cut, and mainly probably talking about the 214 minutes cut, as she had contacted one of the big VFX company that worked on Justice League, and had it explained to her that it's impossible for them to have finished the VFX for that 214-minute cut when Zack Snyder left in May of 2017. Now, only a few days ago, Mark Hughes actually explained to us that he have come to realize that there is a cut that is almost 90+% complete. Then how could that be, knowing full well that Zack Snyder only had 10 weeks to do his director's cut? He only had a few months to actually do post-production, and literally there's only 6 months away from November 2017 release when he left. How could it be 90+%? And so Mark Hughes decided to come into the conversation with Helen O'Hara. Now, Mark Hughes said this: Zack cut multiple versions of the film, some with more and some with less. The first cut was the full longest version, and later cuts were shorter and had more completion as time passed. I'll say I'm pretty certain the folks I spoke to aren't confusing it. If you consider the length of the later cuts of the film, which I've generally heard estimated at around 2 hours and 45 minutes, then 10% of footage being incomplete would equate to about 16 to 17 minutes of footage. That is a surprising find today. But Zack already told us there are many cuts. And so from this, we can probably deduce that the first longer cut is the 214-minute cut, and that's the original director's cut, the movie he wanted to make. But because of studio intervention, because they wanted him to make it shorter, maybe possibly cutting out things here and there, who knows, they've come to an estimate of a 2 hour and 45 minutes, which equates to 165 minutes Justice League. So if we are to believe Mark Hughes here, and if he is correct that the latest cut is 90% complete, that means the 165-minute Snyder Cut is almost complete. That's the one that we could possibly be watching more earlier than the actual 214-minute cut. And that is amazing. That is actually probably still be better than the Joss Whedon cut we see in the theaters. But how much is that? How much more is it going to take? to make finished VFX or whatever needs to be done in that estimated 16 to 17 minutes of footage that needs to be worked on. We're not sure. And that's another conversation to be had later on. But at least we know that a cut exists. In fact, two cut exists. The 214-minute director's cut, we can probably call it the Justice League Ultimate Edition, and also the Snyder Cut, probably the theatrical edition that Zack Snyder cut down for studio approval. Of course, when he left in May, that all changed, and they brought in Joss Whedon to reshoot a lot of the scenes that he had already done to fit the tone that they wanted to match Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is unfortunate because the DCEU is a different type of animal. The industry may want to tell everybody that there is only assembly cut, but now today we know further the truth. And we know which cuts we're talking about, at least. The 214-minute cut is probably the one that's most expensive to finish. The 165-minute one is not so much. But that also means that these two movies are farther along than what they want you to believe. What the studio wants you to believe that it doesn't exist. We know two versions of it exist. And one of them is over 90% complete. Now, does that interest you? Does that make you actually want to see it? And do you think we have enough hope there to actually see some version of the Snyder Cut? One, would Warner Brothers actually invest in either the 214 or the 165-minute version of the Snyder Cut of Justice League? And two, which version would Zack Snyder approve? Let's say Warner Brothers called in and said, hey, this 165 is the least one expensive to make. Let's make that one. Would Zack Snyder approve and say, okay, and he'll be present for the editing of that? Or would he kind of hold off and tell Warner Brothers, no, not until you approve the 214-minute version of Justice League? I'm feeling only time will tell, but the more the studio is silent, the more the public will find out that they've been lying this whole time and that there truly is another and possibly a better version of Justice League. There are two Snyder Cuts. Which one do you want to see? Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.